As a child, she wanted to be a nun, a nurse, or a teacher. Thankfully, engineering happened, and the rest, they say, is history. Today, she leads one of the most respected corporations globally and has led the transformation of the company from being just a products business into a products and services business. Ursula Burns, it's such a pleasure chatting with you here on ET Now. I want to first talk about the state of the global economy, because when you took over, the helm of affairs at Xerox, US was probably in the middle of its worst economic crisis. Much has changed since then, with even the Fed indicating that it's now looking to unwind its massive stimulus program. What's your sense? Do you think the recovery is for real?
I think that the recovery is for real. I think that's for sure. So we have improved from 2009-10 to now. But I think that we slowed. During that improvement, we were on a higher growth trajectory, and we've slowed a bit. I think that we've learned, my company, but companies around the world have learned to deal with the economy that we see today, which is fairly stagnant in the United States, but not getting worse, thank goodness, but not really getting significantly better. We're seeing profit growth, but not with huge revenue growths. So I think we're comfortable where we are. I would prefer for it to be a faster growth.
Just to pick up the point that you're making, because at the other end of the spectrum is the emerging economies, and many thought that they will probably lead the revival of global growth. And the last 6-7 months, a lot has changed around most of these emerging markets. Now that there are visible signs of easy money exiting emerging markets like India as well, how worried are you about the signs of growth that you're seeing in emerging markets like India?
Yeah, I'm actually, in some ways, still pretty positive on these markets, actually in many ways still very positive on these markets, because while the growth has slowed, it's still growing. And I think that operating a business model that's specific to the countries that we're engaged in, operating that business model well and being very specific for the markets will, people who operate better will actually see more growth. I think overall it's slowed down, but I tell you, compared to some of the other economies around the world, they're doing pretty well still. There's a lot of talk about the slowdown, but I think what we have to focus on and what we are focused on at Xerox is not the slowdown, but the current growth rate, which is real, and it is one that presents opportunity. So we're focused on the opportunity.
Specifically about India, the problems probably get accentuated a little bit because most multinational companies that we speak to are worried about the the governance deficit that we see in the country. There are ad hoc tax demands. The policy regime is probably not as transparent as large multinationals like yours would want. Does that, in a sense, worry you a little bit more? The fact that you don't have an enabling environment for big ticket investment?
Yeah, definitely. I think that the rules of the game in a country like India are different than the rules of the game in a country like US or in some of the European countries. But those rules haven't changed massively from a year ago or 5 years ago. So I think it's important that we actually improve transparency, we improve consistency in laws, we improve the balance that doesn't create a deficit for Indian companies versus non-Indian companies. I think that's all important. But I think that this is a place that hasn't changed dramatically since, in the last 10 years. While it would be great if it did change dramatically for the better, we know how to operate here in the current environment. I think for India's long-term betterment, forget about for my company operating in India for the better, for India's long-term improvement, it's better that some of these things get normalized to a more standard business, transparent, predictable level. But if it doesn't, like I said, we know how to do business in the current environment. By the way, it's not as buoyant as it would be if some of these barriers weren't there. So that's why I go back to it would be better for India as a whole, and then we would participate in the faster growth of India if these changes were made.
So you're saying a decision to scale up significantly in a country like India is a function of whether the government and the regulatory environment improve significally.
By the way, this is the decision to scale up anywhere, including in the United States, by the way, which has government and regulatory challenges as well. Anywhere is a risk-reward based decision. Some of that risk has to do with predictability from a long-term perspective. So whether or not you have a set of tax policies that will stay consistent, reasonably consistent over time, whether you can get a return on your investment, of people or land, building, and equipment, whatever kind of investment you're making. That set of decisions absolutely is a risk-weighted one. And the higher the risk, the less the transparency, the higher the risk. The less the consistency, the higher the risk. So from a business person's perspective, I am pretty standard. I don't like necessarily low risk, but I at least like to understand that the risk that I'm taking has a level of consistency on a go-forward basis. If I had that, I can play the game fairly well.
So would you call India as a market with high and predictable risk or high and unpredictable risk?
I think high and relatively unpredictable risk. And why? Consistency around India is a challenge. So India is not a country.
It's not one market.
Yeah, it's not one market. It's a series of markets and a series of states with a series of markets. So it's a little bit more challenging to do business in an environment like India. But I don't want that to translate into it's impossible to do business or the business is worse. It is what it is today. There are good things about this market, great things about this market, and there's certain challenges that this market presents. We have to do business in them, help to try to remove some of the barriers, help to try to improve the conditions of business, et cetera. And we'll continue to do that as good corporate citizens. But as we do that, we have to do business. And we'll continue to do business and try to improve the conditions under which business is done. That's the responsibility that we have.
But at the core, sitting in the US, when you think India, you think growth or you think chaos? What's your natural instinct?
Oh, I think growth for sure. And with growth comes some chaos. When I see growth even in the United States, with very high growth, there's risk that we have to take from an investment standpoint. There are predictions that we have to make, which are always, so predictions are the opposite of surety. So yeah, with hypergrowth comes some level of chaos. Chaos doesn't mean that you can't operate in it, right? So you have to kind of comprehend that in the model that you do business. So yeah, I think India is one. I'm here for a day and a half, and it's amazing when you walk off the plane and get in the car to get to your hotel. There is a car, there is a hotel, and there are roads. And it's amazing that every time I come, we get to the place that we're going. Every time. So I've not come to India and had so much chaos where the journey had an unpredictable end. The end is very predictable. The start is very predictable. The journey is what we have to manage our way through. And I think that just like driving from the airport to the hotel, there's going to be some twists and turns and definitely some things that you didn't expect. But I do think that it's clear that we can get to a positive end. And the twists and turns, we have to kind of keep focused on what the goal is here. The goal is for growth of our business in this market. And in order to do that, we have to not say that I would prefer it to be a certain way, and I'm going to hold my breath until that happens. What we have to be is agile, keep focused on the goal, to keep trying to make sure that we're clear and improve business conditions, improve lives, improve the economies that we work in so that we can actually get better. We'll do that, and the business will grow. It will not be, this is running business, and even in the U.S., which people would say is stable. It's not non-chaotic. It's fairly chaotic there as well.
Even though the government here has been under a fair amount of flack for not pushing reforms through, in the last couple of months, we've seen them take a lot of steps to attract foreign investment. Foreign investment caps across sectors have been liberalized, whether it's telecoms, retail, and the sense that one gets is the government wants to attract more foreign investment. Just recently, we heard the finance minister address the parliament and say that he wants to incentivize electronics manufacturing as well, and that's a key area of focus of the government. At what stage do you think would Xerox look at setting up possibly a manufacturing base in India? Is that something that you'd consider at all?
It's not something that I wouldn't consider. So it's clearly something that we would consider. But I think that I want to step back a little bit and talk about how these incentives and these proclamations by the government, how they would affect our business really. We have a business that's now over half the revenues comes from BPO, IT, or document outsourcing, so a services business. And the way that I actually speak about our business is as our customers grow, we grow. Mm-hmm. So I keep getting back to we'll grow as long as people who use our services grow. Mm-hmm. And as long as we're good at delivering those services. I'm very confident that our skill level and our competency and our innovation focused on delivering those services better is better than just about anyone any one of our competitors. So I'm pretty confident there. So now I just need our customers to grow so I can actually serve them more. That will grow my services business. From a manufacturing standpoint, yeah, I mean, we do a very selective set of manufacturing in-house today. A large amount of that manufacturing has been transitioned to partners who can do it better for us. We still have a large and connected relationship with those partners. And in places where we do the manufacturing, I will consider any space that's viable. So economically viable, intellectual property viable, tax viable, skill set viable. So I won't take anything off the table today.
Mm-hmm. But it's too early for you to seriously start evaluating at it, would you
Absolutely. Say? I mean, the business has to grow before I open up another plant to do anything. I mean, I really don't need another large set of capacity right now. Efficiencies will get me any up volume that I need. And in order for us to consider moving up scale significantly, I mean, we need to have business growth in the technology business, and that's not in our manufacturing portion of the technology business, which is not really happening today.
India itself has a large outsourcing unit on the back of the ACS acquisition. How has growth there been? Are you continuing to hire aggressively?
For sure. We're continuing to hire here, and this connects back to as our customer set grows and as our business continues to grow, India has a couple of things that are undeniable. Mm-hmm. One is it has still today a cost base that's privileged better than the developed economy's cost base. That alone is not enough. It has that cost base which with a level of skill and a size of a skill base that is really good. Its infrastructure is strengthening. I mean, the power, the roads, all the telecoms, that's strengthening. So it's becoming less of a barrier, significantly less of a barrier. So India, just by its sheer size of the educated population, of the improvements in infrastructure, of the fact that they have hubs that are already kind of existing, they have parks that you can, technology parks that you can actually go to, you don't have to build your own. This infrastructure allows India to have a privileged position. People are coming behind, by the way, India, and there's a lot of competition, but it set a good example for them. But today, it's still one of the best places to get access to all of these things. So we actually do look, as our business grows, we look at India as almost a de facto place to put more people and scale up. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But does it then logically make sense for you to look at a possible acquisition? Because IT services is an industry sector where India has a fair degree of core competence. We've seen a lot of really big IT companies develop, and we also have a lot of mid-sized IT companies that could potentially be attractive for a company like Xerox.
Yeah, it's important to think about our business, our services business, as significantly more than IT services. It's actually the smallest piece of our services business. And the largest piece, which is business process outsourcing, which is some of these infrastructural elements I talked about, like finance, accounting, or HR, from more than a IT infrastructure bet, from a transaction processing, from a data analytics sense. Those are the areas that we would look to acquire. So to get to the question, the answer is, of course, we look to acquire business process companies anywhere in the globe that fit the needs that we have laid out, and this is growing geographically for sure, growing capabilities because we need to kind of fill out portfolios with a big focus on healthcare, for example, or we are a big provider to telecom, so data analytics and telecom area. So yes, acquisitions is an interesting area for us, and we haven't ruled out acquiring in India. We haven't found anything we liked right now, so nothing.
So nothing in the cards yet.
Nothing in the cards yet, but there's no reason why not. I mean, we continue to look. A lot of the acquisitions come from our country people, so if there's something that comes that's interesting, we'll look. Scale and size is all things that you have to manage, risk, etc. But yes, acquisitions is a clear part of our growth strategy.
The last few months we've seen a fair amount of debate on the U.S. immigration bill, and it's something that's struck a raw nerve here in India because many here, including the government, see it as protectionist, as discriminatory. What's your own view, because you represent an industry that has a stake in this bill, isn't it?
Yeah. So I actually am not going to go after words like discriminatory or protectionist. So. Good try, but I won't go there. I think that it's important for the United States to lead the way, not only in action, but in thought. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that has made the U.S. market a vibrant market is that we have competed on a level playing field. And I would hope that we continue to approach our laws and our standards from that perspective. I don't know all the details around this bill, but if this bill is doing something other than that, I think that in the long term it won't serve us well.
You're seen as a role model for a lot of women who aspire to make it big in the corporate world. For women employees who possibly in their mind feel that they are discriminated against, or probably who feel that they hit a glass ceiling, what would your advice be? How would you suggest that we go about?
So two things. One is speak up, so make yourself heard. You know, you have to do it respectfully and in an environment that's appropriate for the environment, in a method that's appropriate for the environment that you're in. But silence doesn't do a lot. And so speak up, make sure that people know that you understand that there is a gap here, that your expectation is that your expectation is that there will be improvement, and that you are willing to help to guide the ship for this improvement. That help may not benefit you today, but it will make it easier for the next generation. I'm sitting here as a CEO of a Fortune 500 company, not because I actually, ran through this door. A whole bunch of people ran through the door before I did, chipped away at spaces of it, chipped away at racial discrimination, chipped away at gender discrimination, capability, age, all of these things that were around, and so they left enough of a space for me to fit through. And I chipped away a little bit, and the next generation has to chip away, chip away, chip away. And I think that one of the things that we have to continue to do is realize that we have to work sometimes, women, on behalf of the next generation. And fortunately for us, for me, my forebearers did this for me, but I don't stop, and I think that the women today shouldn't stop either. Literally speak up, be clear, be good at what you do, and make it not a debate about taking, this massive risk, which you hear all the time. I'm going to take a risk on you. Take as much of a risk as you take on any educated, well-trained individual. So be educated and well-trained, and the risk is equal to any other employee. So I think there are so many things that have to happen to have it move faster, and part of it is the responsibility of women. Part of it is the responsibility of cultures. Part of it is the responsibility of companies, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Nobody can step back. And I'll say again, the sooner you solve this problem, the better off you're going to be. So we are not sitting down and trying to have other people figure it out for us, Xerox. We're actually trying to engage as much as possibly, as aggressively as possible, all mechanisms to actually increase our participation in the unbelievable pool of women who are not being pulled on today. It's amazing.
On a lighter note, you've often said that it helps to marry a man 20 years elder to you. Is that an advice that you'd share with young Indian women as well?
Yeah, I'll just say that this was taken a little bit out of context, so let me make sure you're clear about it. I actually didn't search for a man who was 20 years older than I am. I happened to fall in love with a man who happened to be 20 years older than I am.
But it helps.
It did help me. It helped me primarily because of timing. I mean, it helped that literally my husband and I got married, we had children, and at the time when these children, and this is just all about timing and luck, at the time when these children needed a lot more attention at home, it was time for him to retire. And so it worked out that way. By the way, that's not the way you manage your life. It happened to work out for me. I do believe that it is important for families, if we want women to participate differentially than they do today, family structures and family arrangements absolutely have to be a part of the solution. Absolutely. The traditional path that we have today is that women are expected to do, either we expect it ourselves or society expects us to do 3 things perfectly all the time. So we got to manage our own personal life, manage our family's lives, and manage our work life, and the work life. It's not possible to do all of those alone perfectly.
Just to go back to what I started off with, as a child you probably thought you'd be a nun, a nurse, or a teacher. Here you are as a CEO of one of the most respected corporations. What's the trick to this? Do you think the key is to dream big?
Yeah, I think, first of all, I didn't expect to be any of those three things. I was advised that those are the three things I could be. It was clear to me that I could be none of those three things, even though being a teacher was probably would not be a bad outcome. So, for me, where I ended up, which is a hardworking, learning, fairly flexible, true to myself, confident individual, is a product of where I came from. And where I came from was a house that had an unbelievably strong, nurturing, clear, disciplined mother. So I didn't enter any task, any place I went, school, work, with the expectation that I would fail, or I would actually end up at some lower level. I entered all activities with the expectation that I would succeed. By the way, being the CEO of a company is more than just where I was, and it's more success than I could have even imagined, because I didn't even know what CEOs were. But I never expected to be a failure. I never expected to be a bad teacher if I were a teacher, or a bad nun if I became a nun, or a bad nurse if I became a nurse. My mother's expectations was that I would be great at something, whatever I chose to do, and I think that belief is not unusual, is not limited only to wealthy families. It's not limited only to men. My mother was a poor black woman, and so people would say, "Oh my God, I'm so surprised that you made it," and I keep saying, "I'm not. My mother would not have been." Now, being the CEO, she didn't even know what a CEO was, but she would have expected for me to be successful. And so the reason why I say this is that the difference that people focus on a lot with me is the fact that I'm a black woman, and there's an assumption, black woman from a poor neighborhood. And the assumption is that those three things, black, woman, poor neighborhood, means deprived of intelligence, deprived of hope, deprived of opportunity. None of those three things are true. They are the farthest from the truth. So some of the most successful people, think about it, come from this place where reaching for the next thing that's not obvious to most other people is exactly what you do naturally. So a lot of attention on me, a lot of efforts around me, and I think that those efforts and attention are for the wrong reasons, right? They're based on a set of assumptions that are just not true. So my end place is not so unusual. My mother was smart. We were smart. We were raised to hope for good. We were given a great education. We know what wrong and right was about. We knew that energy and efforts by ourselves would end up with something good. And there are many, 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 many people of all different backgrounds, socioeconomic backgrounds, races and genders who have that same belief structure. And I think it's important that we write about that as the core, not as the core difference for my success, not the fact that I happen to be a black woman. By the way, I like that as well. I like being black. I like being a woman. I definitely like being a CEO.
More power to you. Thank you so much. Such a pleasure chatting with you, Ursula.
Very,
Thank you so
good.
much.
Thank you very much. Talk to you as well.